Somewhere in ancient China, more than 2,000 years ago, an emperor was dying, as all emperors eventually do. But this one refused to accept it. He commanded his healers, his alchemists, his court, to find him the one thing that could cheat death itself, an elixir of immortality. And again, the search led back to a single, strange object. Not a jewel, not a potion of gold, a mushroom, a hard, woody, reddish, shining fungus that grew on old trees, so rare and so revered that only the nobility could possess it, and legend said it grew in the home of the immortals, on blessed islands off the coast. They called it Lingji. The West would later know it by its Japanese name, Reishi. And for 2,000 years, across the greatest civilizations of East Asia, it carried a single, astonishing title, the mushroom of immortality. This is the story of the most revered fungus in human history. And the remarkable thing is that when modern science finally put this ancient legend under the microscope, it did not find nothing. It found something real. Let me introduce it properly. Its scientific name is Ganoderma lucidum, though recent research suggests the true East Asian Lingji may be a closely related species, and the debate over exactly which Ganoderma is the real one continues even today. Unlike the soft mushrooms you sauté for dinner, Reishi is a polypore, a tough, woody, shelf-like fungus with a lacquered, glossy, reddish-brown cap that looks almost varnished, as if it were carved and polished by hand. It grows on hardwood trees like oak and maple. And here is the first clue that this was never ordinary food. Reishi is far too bitter and too woody to eat. From the very beginning, it was valued not as nourishment, but as medicine, as something closer to magic. The reverence for this mushroom runs astonishingly deep in Chinese culture. Its name, Lingji, is usually translated as something like herb of spiritual potency or divine mushroom. It appears not just in medical texts but in art, in Taoist symbolism, in ancient carvings and paintings and furniture, always associated with success, well-being, divine power, and above all, long life. Statues of China's most legendary early emperors have been depicted holding Reishi, a signal of just how central this fungus was to the idea of imperial power and cosmic favor. The first written mentions reach back over 2,000 years, to the Han Dynasty, and some evidence hints that people in China may have used it far earlier still, possibly thousands of years before that. One of the foundational texts of Chinese medicine, attributed to a legendary emperor and herbalist, described Reishi in words that capture the entire dream it represented. Eaten regularly, it was said, the mushroom would make your body light and young, lengthen your life, and turn you into one like the immortal who never dies. Think about the weight of those words. In a world with no antibiotics, no understanding of disease, where death came early and often, here was a single object that promised to hold it back. No wonder wild Reishi, which is genuinely rare in nature, was reserved for emperors and high officials. To possess, it was to possess a piece of the divine, a fragment of the mountains where the immortals were said to live. For most of its history, an ordinary person would likely never touch one. Now, it would be easy to dismiss all of this as superstition, the fantasy of frightened rulers grasping at anything to escape their mortality. And the grand promise, the literal immortality, was of course never real. No mushroom makes a human being live forever. But here is where the story becomes genuinely interesting, because when modern scientists finally analyzed what is actually inside Reishi, they did not find an empty legend. They found a fungus packed with hundreds of biologically active compounds. Reishi contains, by some counts, over 400 distinct bioactive substances. Two families of them stand out. The first are the triterpenoids, including a large group of bitter compounds called ganideric acids, which are found in the fruiting body and are, in fact, the source of that characteristic bitterness. The second, and perhaps most important, are the polysaccharides, especially a class of complex sugars called beta-glucans. And these beta-glucans do something remarkable. They interact with the human immune system. When these fungal sugars enter the body, they bind to specific receptors on our innate immune cells, the macrophages, the dendritic cells, the frontline defenders of the body, and they switched them into a more active, more alert state. But here is the elegant part. Modern immunology has found that these compounds don't simply crank the immune system up like a volume knob, which could be dangerous. Instead, they appear to modulate it, to help tune and balance the immune response, supporting it where it's needed without driving it into reckless overreaction. This is exactly the kind of subtle, whole-body strengthening that traditional healers described in their own language thousands of years ago, when they spoke of Reishi replenishing vital energy and fortifying the body's defenses. Modern research has explored Reishi's compounds for effects on the immune system, for potential anti-cancer activity, for protecting the liver, for calming and reducing stress. It has become one of the most studied medicinal mushrooms in the world, a genuine bridge between ancient Eastern tradition and modern laboratory science. But I owe you honesty, because that is what separates real wonder from marketing. Much of the traditional evidence for Reishi is exactly that, traditional, built on centuries of use, anecdote, and cultural belief rather than modern controlled trials. Many of the most exciting laboratory findings come from cells in a dish or from animal studies, and results in those settings do not always translate into proven benefits for human beings. Reishi is not, despite 2,000 years of hope and a booming modern supplement industry, a miracle cure, and anyone who promises you it is has stopped doing science and started selling something. The real picture is more measured. A fungus with genuinely active compounds, real and promising effects on the immune system, and a great deal that researchers are still working to confirm and understand. And yet, step back and look at the whole arc of this story, because it is extraordinary. 2,000 years ago, without microscopes, without chemistry, without any knowledge of immune cells or polysaccharides, ancient healers looked at a bitter, woody, shining mushroom and concluded that it held some deep power to strengthen the body and defend life. They wrapped that intuition in the language they had, the language of immortality and divine spirits and the homes of the gods. And when we finally developed the tools to look inside, we found that their intuition was pointing at something real, a fungus genuinely rich in compounds that speak to our immune system in a sophisticated molecular language. They were wrong about the immortality, but they were not wrong that this mushroom was special. They simply lacked the words we now have to say why. Where they saw a bridge to the world of the immortals, we see beta-glucans binding to immune receptors. Both are, in their own way, describing the same astonishing fact, that a fungus growing quietly on an old oak tree carries within it a chemistry that can touch and strengthen the human body. That may be the deepest lesson of the mushroom of immortality. Not that our ancestors were foolish for their legends, but that their legends were often careful observations wearing the costume of myth. The emperors chasing eternal life never found it. But in their desperate, 2,000-year search, they kept returning, over and over, to a fungus that modern science now confirms is one of the most biologically interesting organisms in the natural world. The dream of immortality was an illusion. The power they sensed in the mushroom was not. In the next hidden history, we stay with the theme of healing, but move from the immune system to the brain itself, to a shaggy, white, waterfall-like mushroom that scientists have discovered can actually stimulate the growth of nerves, and that may hold clues to repairing the human mind. The strange science of lion's mane. If this journey is expanding your sense of what fungi can do, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.